use. We have Artemisia de Vine is our guest speaker, who's an amazing human, retired sex worker, dominatrix, and somatic sexologist, and is now headmistress of the deVinery School of Eros. So thank you very much, Artemisia, and I look forward to hearing your talk. Welcome, and welcome to the people who are everybody else who's popped in who's here. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's going to be really fun. It's always a pleasure when I get to geek out on my favorite topics. So thanks for listening to me. I've been asked to speak about desires and shadow. So Jungian shadow in particular. I'm not sure where everybody is at with understanding these things, so I'm going to just give a little bit of a generic introduction and find out what, get you to ask some questions, and I'll sort of bounce off where you're at. I really love it when you ask questions. I'm one of those people who bounces off people really well. Like as soon as I understand where you're at, I can go, oh, well, I've got all of this I can give you. So please do ask questions. I also love it if I can see your face. I understand it is being recorded and you don't, absolutely no obligation to put your screen on. But again, I bounce off really well if I can see who's in the room rather than staring at a screen. So yeah, I really appreciate that. Okay. So I just wanted to give a quick introduction, and then I wanted to do a little exercise to get myself in my body and connect with you all, and then we'll take it from there. So as Linda said, I am a retired sex worker. I've now started my own little school because, well, basically I've geeked out on sex my whole adult life. I've always had some form of focus or study or exploration or work in the field of sex my whole adult life. And so I was the kind of person that my friends would say, do you talk about anything other than sex? I'm like, you have your hobbies, I'm allowed to talk about mine. And I guess, yeah, I guess over a decade of that was doing sex work in the form of lots of different forms, actually. I went through all sorts of different phases. I went through, I did my sexological bodywork training from Joseph Kramer when he was out here in Australia. One of the very first classes that was out in Australia, I got to join in. It was really fun. When deVinery were learning, that's when I learned in their class. I spent a lot of time learning, doing anal massages as a result. Went off in my own direction with that particular thing. I did a lot of time as a dominatrix, sometimes a switch as well. I did some work with spiritual sexuality traditions, went down that path for a while and really incorporated that, and also escorting. So, and straight rub and tugs, those as well. You learn a lot when you have personal encounters with thousands of people. And what I learnt was everybody has a unique erotic wiring. When that person comes in and they sit on my couch and I have to talk to them before because I set it up so that I actually talk to them before I played with them. That's just how I am. I have a different system. I guess I put my own modalities into place. I'd have it like later on as I got better and better at it. I had at least a half an hour chat with them before we would actually play on the couch. And I would learn so much from them and from their desires, asking all sorts of different questions, and then incorporating what I learned into designing something around their particular unique psyche. And the results were pretty amazing. So I want to talk to you about that and how that is relevant to shadow in a moment. But that's where I'm coming from. So you've got a bit of an introduction. I was just giving people time to arrive. Okay, so I would like to invite you, if you want to close your eyes, you're welcome to. You don't have to. It's not serious and heavy, but it is just, let's just shift our attention into our bodies. Find where our weight is in our pelvis. If you're sitting down, or in your feet if you're standing up. And just take a nice deep breath and breathe all the way out. See if you can let your attention slip down the back of your spine, right down, bumping over all of the little nodules on your spine, and then slipping on down through your legs, down to the bottom of your feet. And just imagine that your feet are connected to the earth beneath you, even if you're in an apartment building. Just imagine that you are now, your feet are on this land right here, where you are, wherever you are in the world. Then just imagine your feet curling in that earth, in that soil. Wiggle your toes. Imagine what it would feel like to have that earth under your feet right now. Then just let your imagination go back hundreds of years, thousands of years, but you're still in this exact same spot. And just imagine that you've gone back as far as humans have been at this place that you have been, that you are right now. Just feel this exact same spot, but there's all different humans alive. There's births happening, there's relationships happening, there's arguments happening, there's humanness in all of its complexity happening. People figuring out how to be together, how to be with the land. And just allowing yourself to move through time, but staying in the same spot. All of the peoples that have come and gone in this one spot. What does it feel like to be here? And moving forward maybe 1,000 years, depending where you are. What does the earth feel like now under your feet? What does the sun feel like? What does it smell like? What's it like to be a human in this point in time? Right here, in this spot. And bringing yourself back closer to now. And coming back to now, but remembering and recognizing all of the humans who've been on the land that you are on. Honoring all of the humans who've been on the land that you have been on. Everyone's in different places. Everyone's got different ancestors. Maybe your ancestors have been here for 80,000 years. Maybe your ancestors came in peace later. Maybe they came in violence. Just want to honor the people who've been there throughout all of this time. For me, I'm on the land of the Wurundjeri people, the Dja Dja Wurrung, and the Tangarang people. They've been here for a very long time and they're still here. And I want to honor their elders from all the way back in the past and in the present, and the ones that are emerging. And I want to acknowledge that it always was and always will be Aboriginal land. It was never ceded, and it never will be. And you can make your own honouring of your own land in the way that you relate to it. When you're ready, let's come back into the Zoom space with me. That feels so much better to come from that place. How did that feel? To go into it and feel the time that went past a little bit. I know we didn't spend a lot of time on it, but how did it feel to do that rather than just a ceremonial way of honouring ancestors?
It felt really powerful. In the chat, Lauren is saying, thank you for the beautiful acknowledgement, Artemisia. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owner of the land that she's on today, the Wurundjeri people, elders past, present and emerging. And also acknowledge her elders of the Karajari tribe, where I call home, which is on Larika land.
Yeah, nice.
And Helen's written, I feel beautiful, I feel grounded and feel a deep honouring. And Luna, Lovecat, says it meant something to actually feel it rather than do lip service to it.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like the humans, the birth, the death, the fights, the narcissists, the glorious idealists, all the humans that have lived in all of the different ways, creating wisdom, learning culture for so long. It's quite amazing to feel it. Yeah. And that is really linked to what we're doing today. Because it really does matter. Embodying what we learn about the erotic psyche really, really does. It makes the world of difference. I'm going to get to that a little bit later, but there is a reason that I did it this way, besides the fact that it's just like a really, I don't know, I really get sick of hearing just the ceremonies. I want people to feel it again. Okay, so shadow. Let's get into that. Let me get my little notes. Okay, there's this really famous quote from Carl Jung about the shadow, and it is, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The latter process, however, is disagreeable and therefore not popular. Well, I'm here to say desire makes that process agreeable. It's really clever, the turn-ons, the mechanisms that we've got. I'm absolutely blown away again and again and again by how clever our mind is in creating ways for us to process life's intricacies and challenges and joys through our sexuality with the buffer of being turned on. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Love it. I'm going to go a little bit into shadow first, because I don't know what people's experience of what shadow is. So if I was to summarize shadow, I would say it is the parts of us that we have exiled, and it's part of our personality or our ego specifically that we have exiled. And we think that's not us. So it's the part of us that when we were growing up, in whatever society you're in, there's going to be some behaviors and some attributes that make you acceptable and some that make you not part of the tribe. Manners, rank, or all sorts of different things. And it's very normal for each family and then each society to encourage some parts of ourselves and discourage other parts. And when we're little tackers, we're really attached to survival. We're really linked to our tribe for survival. And we will suppress parts of our own personality so deeply that we can't even remember them, we're not even conscious of them anymore, in order to fit in with the tribe so that we will be accepted and survive. Because being outcast from the tribe means not surviving. So these aspects of our own personality that we've suppressed, well, you can push them down all you like, they are going to pop up somewhere. They haven't gone away, they're actually still there. And when we're not aware of them, they are still active and in our lives, interacting, influencing our behaviors in all sorts of ways we're not even aware of. So that's one person's explanation of, oh yes, I wanted to point out that the shadow actually is really linked to the ego. So it actually can't exist without the ego, because it is the part of the ego that we are in denial of. So it's an ego-based aspect of ourselves. So it's not just, people get quite confused about what's shadow and what isn't, and they think anything that is negative is shadow and anything that's positive is not. It's not like that at all. It is just what has not been acceptable for you. So you might be you might have just been born with the rank that your particular gender or your particular rank in society or your class needs to be a non-threatening. So you deny that you even have power, and you deny it in your body. You take up little amounts of space. You you speak more softly, or you know, throw the ball like this instead of actually using your power, right? But it's not necessarily a bad thing that you've cut off. It's just that you needed to cut it off for your particular survival, for your particular area. So power, your relationship to power, aspects of that might be suppressed and become part of your shadow, which means that you might then get a reaction when someone you think should be like you behaves in a way that is powerful. You might have a gut grr towards them, like they're not doing the right thing, that bitch boss or whatever it is. That is a little bit of a hint there. When you get that heat from somebody else, like get that heat reaction, of that can be, not always, but it can be an indication that there's some shadow at work. Yeah, something there that we might be able to become more aware of and more in relationship with. But you know, there's all sorts of different other aspects that might be suppressed. Like, think about a little kid who was brought up saying that their particular kind of person doesn't cry. You're not allowed to cry. You're not allowed to wear pink. You're not allowed to like pink. In fact, if you feel these particular emotions, you're going to be in danger. So don't even let yourself know that you're feeling them. Right? That kind of thing. That kind of creates a shadow. Does that make sense to everyone? Does anyone have any questions about that at all? No? Good. We're still on track. That's good. So what do you think desire is? You're a brilliant sexologist. Tell me what you reckon desire is. You can unmute yourself and say something if you prefer not to use the chat box.
Is desire the opposite of shadow? Something that we're attracted to, or kind of like project some part of ourselves?
Desire can definitely tap into all of those things that you're saying, for sure. I think desire itself might be something different. I think desire itself is just purely motivation. It's the one.
Anything that makes sex seem like a good idea.
Good answers. I knew you'd all have great answers.
think for me, in the broader sense, desire is a wanting.
Yeah,
So
it's a
we
wanting.
can desire lots of different things, but it's a wanting of whatever that is.
Mm. It is. It's an energy of wanting, which means it motivates us to move, right? If we don't have that, it's motivation. If you don't want something, you just sit there forever. If you don't want to get up and eat, you're just going to sit there and stuff. So it motivates, it's a motivating force. So I think desire is actually brilliant and really, really wise, even though it's got a terrible rap. But I think that one of the reasons it's got a terrible rap is because as our society, we've pushed it into shadow, right? So we've actually got a bad relationship with it. So it's acting out in all sorts of teenage ways. Like, that's what happens when you put something in shadow. But creating an intentional relationship with it, well, I'm all about that. I love that. That's great stuff. Let me see, what was my next little bit that I was going to say? Okay, so this is an example of how desire can make the process agreeable. We'll explain the mechanics, we'll explore the mechanics of it a little bit later, but I just wanted to give a quote from one of my clients. I kept all of these things that when I wrote for years after my clients, I had sessions with them, things that they would say. Some of them gave me permission to write the whole scene, which was fantastic. I put that on a blog. But sometimes I would just, things that they would say or their reactions or responses, and I'd just de-identify them. And this is one thing, here's just an example of what someone would say after a session. I'm so full of shame, but at the same time liberated. I can't explain it. I can't believe I actually did those things. I can't believe you coaxed me into telling you what I've never told anyone. My ex-wife would think I was sick. She'd be mortified if she knew I thought about these things during sex. But you make me feel normal. It's like you've taken the shame and made it something fun. No, more than fun. That sounds shallow. You've made it work for me instead of a weapon used against me. I've never felt so free. This is the kind of comments we get all the time when we start working with clients and really hearing and listening and trusting to their particular desires, hearing the key elements that are behind it and creating a scene based on those key elements so they can embody it and feel it and experience it. That difference, you just felt the difference between talking a ceremony and feeling. It's such a big difference, right? So the things in the erotic psyche, I want to be really clear though. My particular modus operandi, my way of approaching things is not to try and work out what my client's shadow is. It is to create a particular model. It's to listen to their fantasies and notice key important elements and trust that if I create an embodied experience using those within a mutually respectful, consensual container, that it is going to be the thing that they need to experience. And that is enough in and of itself. That is the thing that will help them create a relationship with their shadow. Because their desire is really freaking smart. It brings up all sorts of things that they've been in denial about themselves about. It's super smart, and it brings it up in exactly the way that their ego can handle it. Exactly the way that's going to turn them on and transport them into an altered state of consciousness to be able to experience that buffer of turn on, the thing that they would normally not be able to face. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. Turn-ons are wise. It's so wise. I learned from thousands of clients, like doing it again and again and again. So what I look for in my, when I'm sitting on that couch, my famous red velvet couch, or I had on my clients, and we'd have conversations. The kinds of things that I would look for are not actually shadow. I would look for their relationship to power. I'd look for their emotional aphrodisiacs, the journey that they need to go on in order to, the emotional journey. So they might need to start off with just the right amount of fear so that they're not tipping over into too much fear, because otherwise, you know, that's going to just go into freeze or defensiveness. But just the right amount of fear and apprehension, and then they're going to need to move through feeling shame. But they need to feel it in this very specific way. And then they need, actually the antidote for that particular challenge is me accepting them in their shame and demonstrating my own enthusiasm for the play, which they interpret as turned on. But I am in a different way. I get top space. Right. So, and then they're feeling that our bodies are in sync with that, and they're having the humiliation, but a deep acceptance at the same time. They've got the poison and the antidote happening at the same time, right? That's really important. I always notice their poison and their antidote. You have to include both. Listening to their fantasies, you have to hear both and incorporate that in the play. Then I would listen to their meta attitudes or feelings that are needed. For instance, lots and lots of people might want to feel like they're not in control. That's their particular power dynamic, but they might need a different attitude that it's couched in. Someone might need it to be really nurturing. I'm in control. I'm the nurse. You don't have any control. Lie there, dear. Yes. Or I'm cold and distant and completely impassionate, and I don't care. You know, there's a different meta attitude going on there. Or I'm gleefully sadistic. There's another meta attitude coming through. So they really need that couch, and you have to listen to several different fantasies to notice which ones are coming through again and again and again. And this really gives you big clues into how to play. There's a few other things too. There's a few other key things that I include and notice when I'm listening to people's sexual fantasies and their desires, because not everybody identifies as having sexual fantasies, although most people actually do have them when you scratch the surface. But yeah, in fact, especially the good girls who say, I don't have sexual fantasies. Oh boy, when you finally get to them, they've got the best. Because shadow, right? Suppressed. Good girls. Oh man, the shadows good girls have. I know, I'm a recovering good girl. I know all about it. So I'm not judging it at all. And it's really fun to recover with sex. Being a recovering good girl. It's a lot of play. It's a really natural way to access joy through challenging aspects of life and being human. I also want to be really, really clear. Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, good. You can see me. You've explained to me the poison and the antidote stuff, and I've understood that before. But I don't know whether if I'd only heard your explanation tonight, I wouldn't have got it.
Yeah.
Are you going to talk about that some more, or could you perhaps go into that a little bit more deeply now? Or maybe everybody else got it and it was just me who thought I wouldn't have got it.
I'd be absolutely surprised if they did get it, because it's actually a really enormous topic. Yeah, so I can go into that a little bit more now, but I was going to go into it a little bit later.
Maybe wait till later unless anybody else really needs to hear it now.
I'm just generally skimming across the surface of some of the things that I would include in the when I'm noticing, so that people understand that I'm not just looking for shadow, that actually what I'm looking for is these other things, because they are the aspects that I would use to trust that the shadow is going to come through by itself if I do these things. Does that make a little bit more sense?
It does. And there's a lovely comment from Luna saying, I got it to an extent, feels homeopathic, which is an interesting.
Homeopathic. Yeah, I like it. Cool. All right. I'll talk to you a little bit about that in a moment. But what I want to do at the moment is give a little bit more context again of where I'm situating shadow and how it would work. I'm going to see if I can share my screen and show you my iceberg of consciousness. Hang on a second. Let's see if it works. It's only going to show everything. Okay, well, look at everything then. Okay. Can you see that iceberg? I can't hear anyone. Yay, you can see it. Yay.
Yes.
Because you've all disappeared off the screen now, I can't see. Okay, so there's so many different models of consciousness. I'm going to keep this really simple. The map is not the territory. This is just like a little simple way of thinking about things that I can situate the rest of this work around. So there's our everyday consciousness, the part of ourselves that we are aware of most of the time, and our everyday personality sitting up here in the tip of the iceberg. And that's the part of us that remembers to, you know, buy milk, tie our shoelaces, gets annoyed at the neighbours for being too noisy on Sunday morning. That part of ourselves that lives up here. Then there's parts, imagine if you're standing up here and you're looking down, you can see beneath the surface a little bit, right? You can see down a little bit. So there's these parts that are semi-conscious, like, so we're sort of aware of them. But we're not, it's not fully clear, and we had no real idea when we're standing here of how deep that iceberg goes, right? So that's aspects of our bodily and psychological process that we have momentary or incomplete awareness of. Then deeper down in the iceberg is still us. This whole iceberg is us. But we've got a whole bunch of unconscious processes going on, bodily, psychological, not that body is mind, there is no difference. Body, mind, it's all the same. It's all connected. But so that's going on down here as well. And then down beneath that, when you realize there's the essence level, the ocean itself, right? So this is the part of that different cultures have been reporting experiencing for thousands of years. Oneness experiences, those moments where we feel as though we don't have an ego anymore. We feel connected with everything. The Tao, the pure potential, the nothingness that is that everything comes from, or yeah, just the dissolving of self, that feeling that people just have been having for thousands and thousands of years. So most of the time we spend our time living up here in the tip of the iceberg. What happens when we create in purposeful play dates, tapping into the key elements of our desires, so we embody them, we take them on, we experience them, is we start to create a two-way conversation and relationship with the semi-conscious parts of ourselves and some of the unconscious parts of ourselves. In here, we encounter all sorts of things. We encounter shadow, but shadow is only one of the things that we encounter in this body of the iceberg. Shadow being, again, the parts of ourselves that we have disconnected from. But it is our personality. We're just in denial about it. So denial, we're not even aware of it. But down here also, this part of us likes to speak in symbolic language, like it likes to speak more in poetry, it likes to speak more in music, it likes to speak in bodily sensations, it likes to speak in sort of knowingnesses or awarenesses. and it communicates back up to the top. But one of the main ways that it does, well, there's lots of ways that it does it. When you're a sex worker, the one that you notice a lot is through desires. All right. So this is the desires are actually creating this two-way conversation with this body of the iceberg and the tip of the iceberg. And when I listen to that two-way conversation and have it on purpose, it starts to integrate the shadow. And the shadow, I'll get to that good point in a minute. I will just have a little side note and then I'll go back to the shadow. When I interact with these things, I end up being able to go far further into the states of consciousness that sometimes touch on these oneness experiences, these ego dissolution experiences, this feeling of connected with everything. Sometimes people in BDSM will call it subspace, this euphoric love connected with everythingness, essence level, if you like, that space. But it's through these other things that we get there. When I was taught spiritual sexuality, they always told me to avoid fantasy, sexual fantasy, because it took you away from your body. Then avoid these desires. These desires were actually distractions to be not attached to. It was much more championed to be deeply in partner engagement with someone, make your eye contact, sync your breath, sync your mirror neurons, the whole lot. All right. To go deeply into that space, or to go deeply into sensate focus. But no, everyone seemed to go, but I don't really know where to put these fantasies, these desires, these things that we want to do that seem really weird. Like, why would I want to be humiliated? Why would I want to, have power over somebody else? Why do I fantasize about being really hot to have power over somebody else? Why is this happening? So it was actually I found that my path for my clients, at least, were through those desires, not avoiding them, going through only partner engagement or sensate focus, but actually deeply embracing them. And that in itself is embracing our society level sexual shadow right there. Looking confused, Linda. Do you want to ask a question? Does that make sense? Or does anyone want to ask me anything before I jump back to the shadow? Yes, if anyone's saying anything, I can't hear them. Okay. Okay, good. We're good? All right.
There's nothing in the chat. No, I think I was looking confused because I was trying to sort out, I was just trying to make sense of it, and it's complex.
It is really complex. And I might have tried to share too much of what I do in one go, which is a possibility. But this context is really important when we start talking about shadow again in a moment. So now I want to start talking about some specific sexual fantasies and how that might relate. So I'm going to stop the share so I can see your faces. I like seeing your faces, smiling away. Okay, let me have a look. So there's this, what we suppress becomes stronger. And it seems like there's this kind of this impulse inside of us to bring things into balance if we try and make it unbalanced by suppressing something. There's some part of us that is trying to move towards balance again. Some, like the yin yang symbol, trying to bring things into balance. It's kind of demonstrated here in this study, this Harvard study by Dan Wegner in 1987. He asked half of the people in the study to not think about white bears. And ring a bell every time they didn't think about white bears. And the other half of the group were told they can quite happily think about white bears all they like, and ring the bell every time they did. And so the people who were told to suppress it did successfully sort of suppress it, like they were a bit less. They didn't ring the bell as much as the other person at the other group. But when they actually were then told to swap around and do the other exercise, so they were told, okay, now you've done that one where you've suppressed it, now you're allowed to think about it all you want. The people who had first suppressed it rang the bell significantly more times than the people who had never tried to suppress it at all. So it was this rebound effect of more bells, more white bears everywhere, white bears. And this really resonates with my experience as well, because as a dominatrix or as a sex worker, if I toured to an area where it was conservative, I would make more money. Like, because there's just so many more people with kinks when you suppress things. It's just how it is. So let's see. And that's also supported by Justin, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Justin Lamela. He's written that book, Tell Me What You Want, which is that he did a survey around sexual fantasies of about 4,000 people in America. It's American based. And he said that Americans' political leanings speaks volumes about the nature of their sexual fantasies. For example, compared to Democrats, Republicans were more likely to fantasize about sexual activities that are typically considered immoral, like infidelity or orgies. I don't know why orgies are, anyway, or taboo, like voyeurism. What? Anyway, I'm a dominatrix. I'm like, what? That's not taboo. I'll give you taboo. He says, my research suggests that the more political and moral constrictions we have placed on our sexuality, the more intensely we fantasize about breaking free from them. Makes sense to me. Again, we're coming back to our shadows. So what then happens if we actually embrace them and we start playing with them on purpose? What happens? Well, lots of people are really scared of this. They think, oh my God, if I start watching porn about the things that turn me on, I'm a bad person. What's going to happen if I start to engage these taboos? Evie says self-acceptance. Helen says brings balance. Yeah. Yeah, it does. So if somebody's in this place where they're acting out, what I noticed as a dominatrix is if they've got something that's suppressed, they start using the play initially as a form of escapism, where they're trying to get a high hit and they're staying stuck in a loop rather than processing all the way through. So I noticed there was a real difference when I was playing with people. If we were to shift some very simple things, but just shift the way that we talked about it, shift the way that I accepted it, we shifted the way they accepted it, shifting the container that I held it in. Just some very, very simple things actually made an enormous difference in, they were still turned on by exactly the same things, but they were no longer stuck in a cycle of needing a hit, going away, feeling guilt, feeling shame, coming back, needing a hit. They were now using this as part of their life where they were feeling at peace and connected, and it was rippling out positively everywhere in their life. They're feeling this balance. I really observed that. Have you guys observed that as well in your work? Do you want to say anything about that? Any thoughts jumping to your mind when I talk about that?
I found it really powerful as a sexologist when you accept people with everything that they bring, with all the desires, you kind of connect with that authenticity as a person, and that is very, very healing. And a lot of us haven't had that opportunity growing up.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so even that's a good point too. Like a lot of us practitioners actually had to discover it for ourselves and didn't necessarily get it given to us. Had to learn the hard way how to be that accepting of ourselves, and therefore be in a position where we can give that acceptance to somebody else. Yeah, it's a great point. Yeah, but it's enormously touching, isn't it? Like, it's so enormously touching. The intimacy that comes out of it is incredible. Like, I can't tell you how many times I would be reduced to tears and feel genuine love for my clients in the things that happened. And I know that sounds crazy, because when both of us are hanging out in the tip of the iceberg, I might be irritated as fuck with them. I might think, you wanker, you misogynist dick. I might think all of these things, right? But once we start slipping down together, down into the body of the iceberg, through play, through trusting desire to guide us, and then sometimes slipping down even further, down right into the ocean, even momentarily, and then coming back up again. Oh my God. Oh, there's no irritating personality in the way. There's just souls encountering each other. It's glorious. It's beautiful. So, yeah, it's hard to explain to people how both things can be true at the same time. That guy is a misogynist. We touched heaven together. But it really works. It can work within the safe container. It's really important to create that play container around it. Okay, so some of the sexual fantasies that might come up that indicate shadow. I reckon one of the ways that we can start to notice that there is a shadow in the first place is there's heat in something. One of the exercises that I get my clients to sometimes do, depending if we've been playing together for a little while or not. Now it's my mentoring clients, because I'm not playing with people anymore. So now I've shifted my methodologies to work in a non-touch way. So they'll work online and in person as well. Is to actually do a little bit of an exercise where we talk about some sort of like the peak erotic turn on, find out what that fantasy is. Let's use let's find a fantasy as an example so it makes more sense. So let's imagine somebody is really turned on by being forced to wear clothes that they consider against their gender, because that's what they were taught. So they are forced to wear things that are sissy clothes, pink clothes, frilly things, ultra uber feminine, more than feminine, ultra feminine. Every sparkle possible. Right? They're being forced to do this, mind you. Oh, poor victim, them being forced to do what they want to do. And they're being forced to own that part of themselves that they would be too terrified to do on their own. But their fantasies said, yeah, you're not allowed to, because you've got to be a macho boy. You've got to fit into the macho box because you hang out with the macho boys, and you're going to get beaten if you don't. So they kind of, but their desire is going, well, there's this part of you that you've cut off. You've cut off from yourself. So let's experience this. But you're going to want to like be able to go, it's not my fault. I didn't do it. I was forced to do it. It's not my fault. Somebody made me do it. I accidentally got an erection while it was happening. Like the fantasy can go along like this. And then they can maybe be forced to shave their legs. So they're actually feeling all of this shame and humiliation that they were being told that they would feel if they did this awful thing, like be like a woman. I mean, God, who'd want to be like a woman? That's the worst thing in the world you could possibly be. Sarcasm. And then, just in case people don't pick up on sarcasm. Okay. Okay, so getting sidetracked by my own excitement. All right. So they're being forced to do this thing. What I will get them to imagine then is, okay, who forced you to do it? Let's focus on that person. Huh? What characteristics do they have? Let's go into them a little bit further. Okay. Oh, they're a woman? Okay. Do you find them attractive? Yep, they're very attractive. What's the physical stance they're taking? If you were to mimic that stance right now, what would that be like? Can you stand like them? What's going on there? Ah, and they start standing like that person. Okay, what's her attitude towards you? What if you took on that attitude? What does that feel like to take on that attitude? Really sink into it. What's that like? Yeah? What they start to notice, and then you start to ask them questions. When they become that character, you can ask them questions. What is it that you really want for, let's just call our client John, a fantasy person who's having the fantasy John. What do you really want for John? What do you think of them? What's going on? You can start to ask questions, and they start to notice qualities and things that you would never notice before. And they go, oh, those qualities are qualities that I didn't associate with me, but I could actually do with a lot more of in my life. Oh, there's something there. There's something there. So sometimes they've projected these qualities onto the other person into the fantasy. That's where the shadow comes out. The parts of themselves that they've disowned is there. Sometimes it's the other way around. Sometimes they're being forced, or at the same time, they're being forced to embody parts of the shadow as well. It can come from both angles, but it's always really good to notice the other character or characters in the fantasies, because that really reveals a lot about what they're trying to form a relationship with, what desire is connecting them with. So does that make any sense to people? Yeah? You still following me? Here with me? Any questions at all? No? Okay. So another way you could do this right now, actually, we could do this right now, except I haven't created a beautiful safe consent container, so it's not appropriate for us to think necessarily about our hottest turn-ons and embody them in front of everyone, because I haven't created the right container for that one. But you can do the same thing with thinking about the kinds of movies you like and watching the same genres over and over again and noticing who are the same people you love to hate in those movies. Oh, you just get so much pleasure out of being irritated by them. That smarmy one, or the person who's like, yeah, who is it? Who is it that really gets to you? That you really have that pleasure feeling of towards, especially when they get their comeuppance. That particular kind of person gets their comeuppance. Can you think of a movie that the genre that you really like, and a character that you really like to see get their downfall? Anyone think of any movie?
I'm someone who loves a great, hilarious dance movie.
Mm-hmm.
I love the underdog dancer who like gets really good, and there's always the character who's always like, no, you're awful, and then like you watch their face as they watch them be amazing, and so like that moment of like eat your words kind of thing, that's definitely like a hating a person in a movie that I get a lot of joy out of.
Yeah, really satisfying, right? Totally. All right, anyone else? I find myself watching a lot of Korean TV, and they've got a lot of the same really unjust, very specific power dynamics. And it's like awful. And then I'll just ham it up and it'll become worse and worse and worse, this power dynamic. But it's a very specific way of manipulating people badly and abusing power. And then when they finally get their comeuppance, oh, I loves it. I loves it so much. It's so satisfying, and you kind of want to, oh yeah, gotcha. So what happens then if I become that character? What if I become the person who was the manipulative power abuser, who was constantly stealing all of the joy from everybody else around them? What if I take on their body language? What does it feel like? What does it feel like? It feels like, well, I feel pretty smarmy actually. I feel pretty smug and sadistic, and there's a sadistic joy in there. It's like and it's a power hungry. It's very much about power, a power hungry thing. If you take on that body language, what does that feel like? I'm kind of like, what it feels like actually is somebody who's actually really scared, defending their survival, and they think the only way to do that is by crushing people around them. Oh. Well, that's interesting. When they're smug, they feel like they've got their power rush, and that feels really good, because when you've got enemies that you crushed, you don't have to deal with your own stuff. Oh yeah, you can project all of the badness that is you onto them and punish them for it. Oh yeah. Really, this is like, you know, an archetypal villain, and yet in that I'm also feeling a vulnerability and a scaredness. And then I'm also feeling a strength and a power rush. That's interesting. What am I missing there? They're setting boundaries. They're hyper-vigilantly setting boundaries. Too extreme. What am I missing there? Oh, there's something in there about boundaries for me. Oh, there's something for me in there. I can feel taking my power actually does feel strong. Taking up space I'm not supposed to take up feels great. Maybe I can, if I'm in balance with that character instead of in opposition, denying that I am them at all, maybe I can be strong and have good boundaries too. Does that make sense? Does anyone? Yeah. So desire just teaches us how to do that, but it does it without having to do the really painful work. It does it by being turned on. It's really great. Recommend. Now, you asked me about poisons and antidotes, Linda. Do you want me to explain that a little bit further? So what I noticed about so I was reading the comments at the same time. I'm not good at multitasking. So what I noticed about my work was that people tended to slot shadow work into healing all the time. And so then people started to think that if you want to play with kinks, or you want to play with desires that are taboo or anything like that, you have to kind of do it under this term healing in order to make it kind of okay. Otherwise it's not really okay, really, is it, to have these taboo desires? And I felt like that there was something not right about that. This slotting this in this framework of we're broken and we need to be healed, and that's why we've got these weird desires. I feel as though it's actually really, like, certainly we can use sexuality and our desires to heal things that are hurt. People do that all the time, and it's really powerful and it's amazing. And their desires guide them into all sorts of interesting ways. But I think that we are really, all of our taboo desires, all of our strange turn-ons, all of the weird power dynamics that we have, they're just us processing everyday life. They're just processing the everyday challenges of what it's like to be human. You're going to encounter moments when you're unfairly and treated by your boss and you can't do anything about it. You're going to have times when you are ecstatic because you just witnessed the birth of a kitten. It's just, but there was pain involved in that birth of that kitten. There's all sorts of different things that we're just processing and creating relationships with, and I really think desire is just constantly guiding us to do that. It's not because we're broken we have these taboo turn-ons or these strange things that we need to create relationships with, or parts of ourselves that are a bit alien and we're out of balance with. It's just, this is life. It's constantly this mosaic of changingness and interactingness, and these are one of the most incredible tools to interact with it. What the desire does is it shows you what the challenge, your life challenge is that you are unconsciously wanting to process. And it shows you the antidote and how to do that. So it shows you can't access your own turn on because you've been told that good girls are never whores. And your desire for multiple lovers is bad. So now you're going to have fantasies about gangbangs and being used. Right? So this is a person who's just discovering, oh, I can access this part of myself. Oh, I didn't know I had this part of myself here. But what about, I don't know, I think that we just like to play. We like to wrestle with power. We like to integrate everything in life that way, don't you think? Like just puppies playing. Have you seen puppies playing? They're wrestling, they're fighting. But they're doing it in a way that is not trying to harm each other. It is pleasure and it's play. So I just think we process and learn through our desires. So I just really wanted to make the point. I can't go really in depth in this time into poisons and antidotes because I think I could probably do a whole week workshop on that because it's just brilliant. Like it's the dimensions to it. Every time you hold it up to the light and see another one, exciting. It's just so gorgeous. Yeah. The nature of desires really excite me, luckily. Yeah. So does that make any more sense with though it's just like a bit of a summary, so a taste of what I meant by antidote and poison in your desires? No? Yes, no.
Where I got lost is like the example of the good girl who's can't access what turns them on because good girls are whores. You don't want to be a whore if you're a good girl. So you fantasize about gangbangs and being as slutty as, and so that's, so that might be the poison. Is the fantasy the poison, but where's the antidote?
Good, thank you. I did skip out on that, but you're right. Yeah, okay, so the antidote is actually being, so let's imagine this gangbang, they're forced to do the gangbang and they're being used, right? It's not my fault. It's being done to me. I'm still the good girl. My integrity is still in place and I get to have all of this pleasure. I get to do all of the things that I always wanted to do anyway. All right. So there's this encountering this part of themselves that says, no, you can't do that, and finding a way to do it anyway. With the somebody who's maybe a cross-dresser, for instance, the poison might be in, I'm feeling humiliated to do this because I was told that if I, as a man, would wear pink, that would be a humiliating thing. So now I'm eroticizing humiliation so that the humiliation can no longer be a barrier to stop me from doing the thing that I actually wanted to do, the part of myself that I needed to access. So I've now turned the poison into its own antidote, and I've done that by imagining this dominatrix making me do it, and she's getting off on it so much, because see what she's doing? She's approving of me right now, because look, I can see it. You can't argue with it. She's getting off on it. Right? And now I've got approval as my antidote to the rejection and humiliation that I thought was going to happen if I accessed this part of myself. Does that make a little bit more sense?
Can I just clarify, is it the, sorry, it's echoing. Can you just
Your
hear
God voice on. Just pretend you're God.
Okay. Is it the being accepted that's the antidote, or is it the fact that you get to do what you really want to do and be okay with that, that's the antidote, or both? That's what I'm just wondering.
I would say in this case, the antidote is actually the acceptance.
Can you unmute it?
I would say it's the acceptance.
Sorry, I'm having technical trouble. That's yeah. Anyway, sorry.
That's all right. That's part of it.
I was going to ask the same question, Anita. In so many of the things that you've mentioned tonight, Artemisia, obviously from a sex worker perspective, I've certainly felt in the magic of therapy, you know, and of people, you know, revealing these secret, shameful parts of themselves. And, you know, the acceptance from a skilled therapist that sits out of judgment and just is curious and wants to explore that. It's just so transformational for people. You know, and obviously we're not actually playing it out through desire, but it's just, you know, enveloping them in that, acceptance, and, you know, so maybe it's working through things in a different way.
I think it absolutely is. And your acceptance of your clients is super powerful and so needed. And thank you, everybody, for giving it. It's really important and beautiful. And it works. One of the things that makes it go even a step further is through embodying this through play. So if as therapists you understand how you can help them recognize the key elements in a particular fantasy and desire so that they can enact them with whoever, maybe a paid professional, maybe a partner, whoever they've got access to, and come back and keep working with you, that's going to be another step that's going to take it deeper. It really is.
And so it's actually having good networks of people, or knowing, you know, what options are available to steer them. I often say you just don't know the right people, or you don't know the right communities, or, you know, to actually be able to send them, you know, into somebody that can take care of that and help them explore that.
Yeah, absolutely. And also somebody who can recognize these different elements in the fantasies, because not everyone can.
Absolutely.
So it's about asking that. But what you were offering in the talk part of the therapy, that acceptance, enormous. And I'm giving that when I'm sitting on my couch before I play. It shifts again when we go into play. So the next level of acceptance comes from the part of, remember the iceberg I showed you? Has to speak the language of the body of the iceberg. It has to speak in the language of symbols. It can't just be straight up accepting someone. They need so because part of them is still never going to believe it. But when you trust their fantasy to tell you that the way that they need acceptance is for you to humiliate the shit out of them and get off on it, then that part of them is going to feel that acceptance. Right? Because because you're trusting their fantasy. You're not projecting onto them, I've got to be nice to you. You've got low self-esteem. I'm not going to humiliate you. Like that's actually rejecting them. Yeah. So, yay, Zoe. Yeah, so and again with good girls, so often you feel unattractive. Again, an antidote in that gangbang might be, look at all of these people who can't control themselves. They want me so much. I must be so desirable. Right, but you're giving it to them in the way that their unconscious needs to hear. One of the things that I learned, and it's really, really important to know, there's a lot of clients that will come along and they'll say, I've got this fantasy. If you act out the exact fantasy, it often doesn't work. It falls flat. That's why listening to the key elements that are in it and asking them about a few different peak erotic experiences and noticing again the common things that are coming through on their different emotional aphrodisiacs, their particular erotic paradoxes that they need to struggle through to get to something, create friction to get through, their particular meta feeling that they need to access, their particular poison and antidote, the way they need it. But then you can get really creative. You can get amazingly creative when you understand these particular aspects that keep coming up again and again and again for people. You go, oh, wow. So I have the same client come back again and again and again. I do a different scene every time, but I'm tapping into those hot points every time. And they're like, how did you know? How did you even know to do that? What is that about? And I'm like, but I guess as therapists, right, you don't want to go, you want to go, okay, here we've got this person who wants to have a relationship with someone and tap into these things. I want to help them become aware of what these key elements are so that they can recognize and ask for them from somebody and recognize that their partner has separate iceberg with separate things in their body and separate symbols, and they need to access a different thing, and how those two icebergs are going to have to interact. It's not just the tips of the icebergs interacting, it's the bodies too, like the whole complex thing. So I guess as therapists, what my work would be useful for is helping you have the tools to be able to help your clients recognize those particular elements, and then giving them exercises to be able to access them, go away and explore them systematically, bit by bit, till they get them on an embodied level. Because that's probably the most relevant to you, I would imagine. But tell me what you're interested in, and I'll talk about that. What would be useful for you? Can you see any way that this work could support your work? Yes. Can you give me
I hear the abstract theoretical concept of what you described. Can you give me an example? So let's say you've got the client who secretly wants to wear, who likes the humiliation, the pink and frilly. How would we support that client to find that in their everyday life? Because that's a really risky thing to do. Yeah. I begin with, well, like my course that you know about that is coming up. I begin by helping them date their desire until they create an embodied relationship with their desire and learn the language of the desire itself, the way it speaks in symbols, the way it speaks in body signals, the way and knowingnesses and fantasies. They can't even begin to trust it, to play with it before that, you know. But then you need to understand, when you understand the symbols, because people will often go, I've just fantasized so hard about these pink frilly knickers, and in my life it's actually really dangerous for me to wear that. I would put my life in danger if I did. What you would do for that kind of person is you would go, okay, we're going to go into some exercises to work out what the pink frilly knickers actually represent and how you can get that feeling through play without the actual knickers. That's a symbol. Knickers are symbols. What's it trying to get to? Right? And how is that going to, how can we find that symbolically through play for you?
in situations that work for you. Because, you know, sometimes people don't want to, sometimes people do have a kind of spouse that would reject them for something like that. And it's going to take months of counseling together before they would accept that part of themselves. We don't want to rush these things. It needs to be integrated a bit at a time.
And so that might be them just perhaps taking on a more submissive or a more feminine sort of role. Would the spouse ever be involved in you know, that the work? Or
in my ideal world they would, but humans are humans. I can't make them.
No, of course, but actually thinking about what practically they can take home. Would that be them perhaps, you know, taking that more submissive role? Or again, you're talking about the knickers as representing, you know, the symbol, or, you know, what does that actually represent? And that might be, you know, being more feminine, or, you know, and then you would kind of workshop ways that they might be able to explore that in a safe or accepting kind of, or a way that their partner might accept.
So what if you actually took them into an exercise where they were wearing their knickers, and like I was with the villain before, right?
Yeah.
What are they? Get them to notice, what are they feeling in their body? What emotions are they feeling? What power dynamic are they feeling? What's it like to be them in that state? What aspect of themselves have they got access to that they don't without the knickers?
Yeah.
Then find that, and find other ways to symbolize that in embodied play. Or find ways to make knickers safe in their life.
Yeah.
Combination of. But, you know, I just recognize that the world isn't ideal for everybody. Personally, I think everyone should wear the knickers. They're great. I think Cassandra wanted to say something. No? Because nothing to say? Okay.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it?
Well, I think it's endlessly fascinating. Like, I'm just blown away with it time and time again. And yeah.
There's a great comment. So it sounds a bit like you're an interpreter between them and their psyche, and them and their bodies.
Yeah. Remember our iceberg image? I am the siren dragging them down into the body of the ocean. I'm seducing them down to their death, but only to their ego death, where they become free and they fly and they swim. And then bringing them back in aftercare, really important. They've got to be whole with the aftercare. Yeah.
I've got a question. You said earlier that some people say they don't have fantasies, and I actually encounter that with the people I work with. I often, you know, when I'm asking, I've never had fantasies, I don't have any. And you said that you have ways of, you know, getting it out of them. Can you say a little bit more about that? About, you know, what you might say if they say they don't have any? Might be different because people come to you probably with maybe more fantasies, I don't know, that they want to play with, but yeah.
No, lots of people think that they don't have fantasies when they come to see a sex worker. They think they only like big boobs, or or they really want a relaxing erotic massage. Lots of people don't have any recognition of that. And also just talking to friends who think that they don't have fantasies. One thing that can happen is you can say, can you remember a time that you're going to have a really hot date this Friday night? It's going to be an amazing hot date. Can you imagine what that's going to be like? And they're all, yeah, it's going to be like, they're going to treat me this way. We're going to do that. I'm going to feel this way. Like, you just had a fantasy. Anything that you imagine, anything that you use as fuel to feel this, or imagine that's going to make you feel, you know, amorous, it's going to make you feel turned on, desire, that is a fantasy. Sometimes people only have fantasies of body parts initially, That's what it starts with. But what happens is when they go through and actually date their desire, to be honest, goes through this process of actually really getting to know desire on an embodied level, they start to recognize fantasies. I swear, like I've had mentoring female clients who've gone, I don't have any fantasies. I don't have any fantasies. I don't have any at all. I only like really sweet, loving romantic sex. That's it. That's all I want ever. I'm like, okay, that's cool. And by the end of a few sessions where they've started to do some exercises where they've really gotten to know and trust, because they don't trust desire to start with, really get to know desire as a being and its motivations and its language, then they come out with the best fantasies they didn't even know they had. It was so deeply put into shadow. Their desire was so deeply suppressed because it was terrifying to even acknowledge to themselves that they had these desires, because they'd be cast out of the tribe if they had them. But yeah, there's this, I'd love to be able to explain to you how I do the whole date your desire thing, but it's a 4-week course and it's step by step, so it's hard for me to explain in one go.
Wow.
Yeah.
It sounds like beautiful work.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I love it. It's really human. It's all of the things that makes us human in symbol, in the safe container of play together. How good is that?
Yeah.
It's the best. Who doesn't want to spend their life doing that?
Artemisia, can you talk to us a little bit, and we haven't got long, but to talk about how aftercare might look from our perspective? Because aftercare is really, like we're going to really deep spaces. How would be a good way that we could ensure people were well cared for?
Okay. In a therapy perspective?
From the perspective of the therapist.
Or as a play partner?
A bit of both, because they're different. There'll be theoretical aspects that are the same, and maybe it'll be embodied in different ways.
Okay. So I found it was really important in my sessions to not just do the pre-session consultation, but also to allow time within the play space for come down and connection and reintegration of their consciousness back into the tip of the iceberg, right? But interestingly, after the play, it's not just in the tip of the iceberg by itself. It's now moving back and forth, up and down, much more freely throughout the iceberg. But I need to bring them back into a sense of ego and self before they walk out the door, right? That's really important. So I could do things like grounding them, getting them to look around the room, getting them to focus on things that their eyes like to look at, giving them some chocolate, a cup of tea, changing the tone of voice, shifting the power dynamic, asking them questions, but slowly but surely, gently asking them questions that reorient them in the kinds of realms where they know that they have to get taxis and remember their wallet and things like that, bringing them back. But then that's just that part is I actually get them to then contact me within 48 hours after that, and we have a good conversation. And that's debrief. So I call debrief separate to aftercare. Aftercare is still in the altered state, coming back out. Well, this is just how I use the terms. But the debrief afterwards is when we talk about it again together. Just make sure is there any shame spirals coming up? Have you gone into a place where you are now in subdrop? Have you got anything going on? What are you fantasizing about for next time? Are you super excited about that? Do you need someone to talk to about that? What are you noticing? Let's bring your attention to your body. How are you feeling different than you were last week before we played? What's going on there? Just really connecting with that and seeing where they're going. And I just bounce off where they are in order to be able to care for them in that position. Yeah. Yeah. And also they just love hearing that I love hearing about it. How validating is that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know it's certainly part of my therapy work, talking about doing the debriefing. How did it go? Hearing about it afterwards and sharing that interest and excitement about how it went, particularly if it went well,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to support it if it didn't go well. Yeah, that's a lot of the work we do. There's a question in the chat about, and can you give us an idea of some of the ethical challenges you have and how you manage that? So yeah, I don't know unless Kate Marie wants to explain what kind of ethical challenges she was thinking of.
Hi. Yeah, the question was from me. I just wondered, there's so many directions it could go, but I just wondered, I guess, how you manage particularly clients, if you call them that, and if there's anything ethically that comes up for you that doesn't align with your value set or that challenges you on a spiritual level. And, you know, do you have things in place, like whether it be managing your own boundaries and that you don't take on certain clients, or that there's almost like a not triage, but like an intake process for you, and what that would look like. And also, or if it's within play, is there anything you do to kind of detach yourself to some of that? And I guess your own self-care and probably debrief as well, coming out of some of those sessions with clients. There's a lot in that, but if you can answer any,
I'll cover that in 3 minutes. I'll go right now. Okay, good questions though. Really great questions. Yeah, I have found that unless it is something like within the container of adults playing consensually, there's very little that I'm not comfortable with.
Yep.
Right. Part of that is because I have had so much experience that I now deeply trust desire is guiding my client where they need to go, even if it doesn't make any sense to me and it's not my particular turn on. Right. And so if somebody is not able to hold that consent container, and they're not, they haven't worked through whatever issues they've got going on yet enough to be able to respect me and themselves in that space and keep that consent container beautiful, then I can't play with them. So that would be the thing that would stop us.
Sure. So
that's happening, but I don't play with them anymore. But this is what I did when I was playing with them. Yeah. But same too with therapy. So it's the same thing. If somebody wanted to come to somebody and they're not able to, they're going to stalk you afterwards. They're not honouring your safety. You got to put your boundary up, right? Like, yeah. But if they are able to, then you can work through all sorts of different things. If it's going to be a personal trigger, if you're there, that's true actually. Certain things are personal triggers of mine. And that's actually usually a weird body language thing from some sort of God knows what from when. And if I can't work with them, I can't work with them. I say, look, maybe somebody else would be better for you. This is because I can't hold safe space if I'm triggered.
Of course. And then it's going to be worse for the client if it's not kind of accepted as approval, and that psychological safety that would put them further back in their own acceptance, I guess.
Yeah,
as
totally.
well. So working both ways, yeah.
It'd be poison and poison, no poison and antidote. Yeah, we've reached 9 o'clock.
Thank you.
That went so quickly. Oh, there's Kath. Picture. Anyway, I can see. I can't hear you talking though. Okay. I guess that's the end. I guess if you're interested in any further, you can look at my website. It's artemisiadevine.com. I am running the Date Your Desire course starting on the 14th of October. We've got some lovely people coming along. Some of them are therapists. Or maybe you would think that their course might be relevant to some of your clients. I'd be totally up for referrals, just saying. If you feel as though it resonates and it is right, it's right. yeah, if you'd like to contact me, that's the way you can do it.
Thank you so much, Artemisia. That was just amazing. And really, yeah, lots of people have put in the comments how much they enjoyed it, and they were enlightened and learned things. So it's really, and I think it's taken some of the way we making great suggestions into perhaps how we might rethink some of the approaches that we take, or even use different terminology and understanding of what it is that we're doing, where are we going, and to fit it into that, to take the Jungian perspective and to fit it into that consciousness iceberg is a really useful approach, I think. So yeah, you've been brilliant. Thank you. Really appreciate it. And I'll disclose, yeah, I did the pilot of the Date Your Desire course, and it's a really interesting approach. I highly recommend if people are looking for something or something to recommend to clients, or they're not quite sure, people who don't know who they are, maybe that might be a really useful resource to offer.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you've been great. Thank you so much. It was so fun to share it with you.
Yeah.
Right, who presses end?
Well, I have the ultimate power of kicking everybody out if I want to. You and I you need to have a chat about recording, because did you start? It says it's recording, but I didn't actually ever press record, so I'm not sure what's going on with that. So we'll need to make sure that one of us has got it at least, or preferably both, and we'll share whichever way.
Okay.
You are recording it. You pressed the button.
I did.
Yeah. Well, see, it hasn't given me that option. It's already. I can stop it, but I wasn't aware of having started it in the first place.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Love you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Great stuff.
Thanks, darling. That was great.
I'm still here. How did that happen?
I haven't ended you. It's yours. I'll make you go away now. Or you can end you for yourself. You are co-host. But yeah, thank you for attending. Thank you for doing that. And I think it was a really I love the diversity of the approaches and the kind of PD that we've been having, because it's like so many levels and approaches and where we can work. It's the more we know, the better we can do good work with our clients.
Yeah, cool. Excellent.
And to have people to refer to as well, where we think, I think this might work with them, but it's not my expert area, so we'll pass it on to the expert.
Yeah, great.
Thanks, gorgeous. And you look lovely, and your space looks just beautiful.
Thank you.
And now, bye.
Bye.